Learning about today is intro to a concept called TDD. And what that is has anyone heard of it before? Great. So for those in the back, it's test-driven development. And there's also another type of testing called BDD. Does anyone know what that is? Yes, it's a behavior-driven development. Can anyone tell me the difference? Normal response? Sure.
Behavior-driven development? I'm guessing one is like, can I guess at it?
You can, but let's let Janai.
Go ahead, Janai.
Is testing where you kind of break your code? No. Like, edge cases where behavior just does it correctly. That's my guess.
Okay, that's a pretty good guess. There are edge cases involved with testing, but it is not designed to break your code.
That's what Daniel guessed.
I'm sorry, that's who what did?
That's what Daniel guessed. Why?
Oh, okay, cool. Daniel?
I'm guessing testing is like writing code where you're trying to get it to behavior would, let me define behavior. Behavior would probably be like running your code over and over again to actually see if it does what you want it to do in the first place.
That's what testing is in general, right? When you...
I tried it.
That's very good. No, it's good. It's a good attempt. I like it.
Is it?
Yes,
I would
Nikki.
assume test-driven development is like when you have an aspect, you make a test where you have like, you do this, you expect it to be this, and then see if it does what you want it to do based on that. And behavior-driven would be like when we took the first exam where you have things do a bunch of things and you create cases that test yourself without it being explicitly like a patch of them.
Okay, so I'm just going to give you like a general guideline, right? That's a pretty good guess. So test-driven development just means that you are going to write tests, right, for what your feature should be doing, and ultimately those tests are going to drive your development process, like the code that you actually write. A good example is you clone a new repository, and immediately, before you do anything, you skip the README and you run learn, right? Like a lot of you do. I know you do. I've seen it. So you don't understand what's happening, but you want to pass, and that's okay. There's a better way, all right? You have to understand what it is that you're doing. All those tests are written because it is designed to get you to build something. Once you can build that thing, then you have to worry about something known as edge cases, and we're going to talk about that later. All right? So test-driven development means I'm going to write tests first because I want to scope out what it is that my feature does. And then I'm going to write the code for it. Behavior-driven development is something that you will learn more in Mod 2, 3, 4, and 5. But essentially, you will have features that aren't testing specific methods. All right? Right now, all you know in your realm is just like a method will do something, and you want to test that method. That make sense? So like if I want to be able to log in to a website, I want to test that I can actually log in. That is more than one method. That is a series of methods to include user clicks, right? Like a user has to type in some parameters. I have to validate that, do my validations work. There's a process there, right? So today we're just going to talk about TDD. Any questions on that? Who wants to learn how like our spec is written? Finally dig in, right? So a lot of times when you walk up to one of the instructors and say, why doesn't this test pass? Or how do I get this test to pass? While that is a good question in and of itself, it is not the purpose why you're here. It's about learning, right? It's about conceptualizing what is actually happening and what is some of the auto magic that's happening under the hood, right? Active Record was your first dive into a large, what is it, like framework or library?
I would say it's like a library.
It's like a library that does so much for you that you need to understand how it's working in order to debug it. All right, so let's talk about a perfect example, right? The Power Rangers. Who's familiar with this concept so I don't waste people's time? Huh? Who's heard of the Power Rangers before? Okay, cool. I guess we're accepting nods now. So the way the Power Rangers work is that they only work and they only win when they are like assembled. You know what I'm saying? For whatever reason, I don't know why this has like 18 seasons, but they always lose, right? It's like how the episode starts. It's like, oh man, there's a monster. Let's just try beating it up. And then the monster grows like 30 times in size, and then they have to form the Megazord, right? They have to get into this giant robot and kick its butt. The problem becomes like, what if like the Yellow Ranger's like sick? Like, yo dog, I'm not feeling it today. It's not gonna happen. Now your left leg doesn't work, and you can't win, right? The point I'm trying to make is that if you have to change something in your code, if you have to change a method, all right, in your code, likely it will affect the bigger picture, right? Your Megazord, your run file. You ever go back and like rename a method because it don't make no sense? Right? Or you have to like change something in one of your methods, all of a sudden your whole app breaks. Writing tests can isolate exactly which method is breaking and preventing the Megazord from forming properly and ultimately winning. This is like all the Power Rangers metaphor is for. I'm going to stop this because this GIF is like driving me nuts. But that's really about it. All right? So any questions on like why you would write tests, what tests are for, and the importance of them? Anyone want to ask a question at all? I'm just trying something new here. Okay, cool.
But if you, so say you write a test like something, if it's like a method that does +1, you do expects 2, like given 1 expects 2, right?
Okay.
Why can't you just run the test and see if it outputs 2?
That's exactly what you would do.
Oh. So what's the point of like writing the test?
Very good. Can you tell me, honestly, whether or not you remember all your code that you wrote yesterday? Okay, great. Clicked, right? Yeah. So let's just say, for example, you're working on a project that takes more than one day. You have not really experienced that yet because you've been working on labs. All right, you finish a lab, you bang it out, boom, I move on. But now you have a project that spans multiple days. If, however, you do something to your code that you wrote 2 days ago, or you wrote something that's going to affect the Megazord or the app, and your old code still works exactly as intended, and then the code breaks, where do you think the problem is?
Where you changed it.
In the new code, right? If you can always test your old code and understand exactly what it's going to output, and then something breaks, you can just run the test to see where it breaks, because you always know what the output is. And here, let's go to a really awesome example, right? I have here for you awesome code, obviously, in a file called Power Rangers. Very good. Thank you. No laughs. So, I've written already some great code for you. Right? I'm just going to wipe this, and you'll see it. Boop! Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to recreate in the most shallow way possible the Power Rangers. Right? So we've got blue, black, pink, yellow, and the white Ranger.
There's a red ranger.
Okay, very good. Cool. Thank you. Easy. All right. Why is there what now? Wow, what great questions. But before we do anything, let's make one, right? You know what? Fine. You want to play? I'll play your game. All right, cool. These are the original Power Rangers. Right? First of all, that's racist, right? Secondly, we'll get there, all right? I'm going to take you on a journey, all right? Thanks for all the questions. So, let's assemble the Megazord, all right? Easy. Def Megazord, right? I think that's how you spell it. Cool. How do we do that? Yes, Sean. Do I, though? Yeah, let's do that. That's how I assemble the Megazord, right? I got red, and then do I just do this? Blue, pink. What do you mean, no? And then silence. Great. Yellow, right? And who else we got? Black, right? What's going to happen? Let's run it. What do we got? Ruby Power Rangers? Nothing happens. Why? So I have to call the method, obviously. Come on now. Rookie move. It's like week 1 stuff. Why is this breaking? Why?
Does it think black is an argument of yellow?
Huh?
Does it think black is an argument of yellow?
Yes, it does. Because it reads this way, right? So in order to combine them, we drop this Bad Johnson. I'm so lazy, I'm just going to copy it. Oops. Bloop. You guys saw what I did there? It's Command V, because I know you like shortcuts. In case you've been doing it the long way. Cool. So, let's see what happens. Oh, stop the madness. Stop the madness. Cool. What happened?
No output.
Very good. Cool. Right? So this is essentially the Megazord. They're all in like the cockpit doing this move right here. You know? And that's okay. So now the question becomes, what if, right, you want to introduce someone new, right? What if we want to introduce someone new? Like, someone talked about it, right? We have, I don't know, the Green Ranger, right? So your boss comes up to you one day. Sorry, this is not going to work. Right, if you highlight something and then add the string, it'll stringify the whole thing. One of your last shortcut tidbits from me to you as a gift, right? I can, but you know who else can make a list for you? I was gonna say you, but I like where your head's at. So, your boss says, great, listen, Power Rangers are awesome. We're in our 19th season. People are getting tired of this formula. We gotta spice it up. We have to introduce a new Ranger. So you're like, yo, got it, MBD fam, Green Ranger, right? You're just gonna introduce this green one. And so you just add them. You're just like, cool, I'm just gonna do this, right? So you're like, cool, let me test. And essentially, now green isn't there. Now I don't know if you know this, but according to Power Rangers lore, the Green Ranger is actually bad. It's like a bad to the bone. Yeah, hitting on Kimberly. Embarrassing. Anyways, the bottom line is he becomes good and becomes the White Ranger. So let's just say you didn't write this 4 seconds ago in this fantasy world. And they tell you, by the way, this is like buried under some more what I would describe as like awesome code. Ooh, all sign code.
I like that.
All right, thank you. Thank you, very good. All right. And they were like, hey, listen, the Green Ranger is now the White Ranger. All right, you're welcome. I had to include the White Ranger. So now, they're like, great. I changed the Green Ranger to white. Let's ship it to production. I'm good. Is this all right? Is this going to work? So this is what happens, right? It still thinks the Green Ranger exists, unfortunately. Imagine your runner file was in a different file from your classes. It would be hard to see where you change something, how it affects the rest of your code, right? If I need to change this one place, where else do I need to change it? So you can write these tests that show if I change something, I need it to come back broken, or I need it to give me some sort of F, red, like, hey, you're wrong, or like, go back and look at this. And this is essentially what the tests do. How many of you have like written something and then old tests failed in your lab? Right? What does that mean? It means that it doesn't meet the conditions it's supposed to from before. It only meets the new condition now. So does that spell good news for you in the long run? No, it means that in order to implement something, right, you've foregone some of the original features. If you were a user of that, that'd be quite frustrating. Like, hey, great, you fixed this bug, but the old features don't work now. That's a bad user experience, right? And so this is the purpose of tests. Let's leave Power Ranger land, yeah? Cool. I wrote this awesome program for you called program. Actually, I have to fix it. Sorry. This is a problem for me. Oh, Cool. Because I don't want to ship code that doesn't work, right? Sorry. So now, who has seen this before? Is a palindrome, right? Who can tell me how they would solve this? Sure, May.
If you reverse it, it's the same as the original words.
So what would you put?
Word. It's not to be to use reverse.
Yeah, very good. All right. So, who agrees with this? Okay, for those that don't agree, why would this not work?
It would work for words, but not for sentences because sentences have spaces.
Well, what if the spaces are perfect?
I'm not sure why.
Okay. Great. So, the point is, this works right now, right? So first make it work, then do absolutely nothing, right? Cool. That's what we do, right? Refactoring, ha 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 ha, and other hilarious jokes you tell yourself, right? I'll refactor that later.
Downcase there?
Oh, easy, easy, easy. All right. We have to write our tests, all right? How do we write our tests? What? But where will we put it? In a spec folder, right? Where's our spec folder? Huh? So the first thing I tell you all to do is to understand what's happening in the app. So here we have a gem file. All it is it takes an RSpec, something called RSpec expectations. This just increases the functionality for RSpec, and I'll get into that later, and our favorite debugging tool. All right? The README here today, it's empty. It's just all about tests. I can just put Power Rangers. Yes. Cool. So, how do we get RSpec in here? So this initializes RSpec. Do you remember rake? And I told you all the powers of rake. So what's happening here, not necessarily rake, but it does this. It creates a file called .rspec, and it creates a file in a spec folder called spechelper.rb. Do you see that? So let's take a look. In .rspec, all it is require spec helper. Wonder what that does. I can Google it, or I could dig a little further. In spec helper, right? This is what we have. Automatically generated by RSpec init. Very good. The .rspec file contains this one command, which will cause the file to always be loaded without explicitly requiring it in any of the other files. Which is why whenever you run learn or RSpec, you don't really see all the other requiring, because spec helper is doing that for you. But when we're testing it in our own binding or in the rake console, we will have to require it, like the config file, which requires everything, right? It has that require all in there. So this is where some of the magic is happening. The way spec works is you have to have a file name in here, underscore spec. If you don't put underscore spec, it will not read it. It will just straight ignore it. Any questions on that? If you want to read through this documentation, it explains that. But if you also wanted to change the configuration, like print the 10 slowest examples, blah, 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 you can, in fact, do that. This is really good documentation. All this is currently commented out. This is worth at least one read-through on your own. Yeah? You don't have to understand everything, but it's worth one read-through. Cool? So, let's test it. How do we do this? Maybe program underscore spec. So it reads it. And that's the naming convention for RSpec. So when you run RSpec, it's going to load all the files under the spec folder with underscore spec, and it's going to run all those tests. Yeah? Who remembers how to write RSpec? Who has actually looked at the spec file? Cool. How do we do this? What's the first thing we should do when talking about the tests that we are writing? Very smart. All right, let's do that. Require?
Will require official employee to require relative spec helper. And then you also need to require all of the.
You don't need to require spec helper, as I've literally just went over.
Okay, sorry.
It pulls it in from spec helper. Cool.
So then you just need to program it.
Like this?
Yeah.
Cool. Why did I put the 2 dots?
Because you get it back.
It's not the same directory.
What?
What directory you have?
It's because I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. It's not in the same directory.
Exactly. Right? So I'm current directory is spec. I want to go 2 folders up and find something called program. Whoa. Right? I want to go from here. This is current folder. I want to go 2 folders up, and inside this, I want to find something called program. Cool. So what's the first thing we should do? All right, we want to describe the test that we were testing, right? So the first thing is I'm probably going to want to name the method. And what does that describe do? It should what?
Tell you the words of palindrome.
Yeah, right? Tell you if it actually is a palindrome or whatever, and then you trailed off, right? Or not. So is that like a good test? Probably not. So I'm going to teach you about RSpec, right? This is generally the format. With RSpec, there are 3 main guidelines for writing your tests. The first one is I have to make sure it works, right? I have to actually make sure that it works. So I should be putting in input that I know should return true. So let's do that. So it should, what? Return true in this case, right? If input is a palindrome. Cool. And what should that do? That's going to expect, there we go. This is it. And what's the method name? And what's the input that we want to test? Everyone wants race car, right? Cool. Let's put race car. And then you want that to equal what? True. Everyone wants race car. Open your minds. There's a lot more palindromes out there. Cool. Let's test, yeah? Boop, boop, boop. I need a little bit of that. A bit of this. How do I run it? I could RSpec, right, which will run everything in my RSpec folder. Or I can actually specify the actual file. Right now, I only have one thing in there. So it's okay to just run the whole folder, right? So what do we get? Thank you. Nobody else? Wow, sorry, you've all so good at passing your test. So the next thing we should do is we should, if we have to make sure it works, we have to make sure it also doesn't work, right? So let's do that. Bloop. Oh no. Oh, I got time. Haha. Just kidding. Psych. All right. I have a meeting with Brandon. So it should return false, right? If input is not a palindrome, right? Little false action here. And what's not a palindrome?
Slide duty.
2D? Or you probably meant like this, right? Yeah, very good. What?
D-O-O-G-Y? G-Y?
I'm sorry my slang is not up to date. I'm obviously unrelatable and a bad instructor. What should we see here?
Two passes.
2 examples.
Huh?
2 examples, 0 failures.
Cool. Sorry, I like pounded the slash key by accident. So, I mean, it's just so you see it again. So it's nice and clean for you. All right? Questions? So this is the first rule, right? You have to make sure it actually works. Part of making sure it works is that it returns false if not true. That made sense. It made sense to me. So my question to you is, what else should we be testing for, right? The first rule is make sure it works. So you have to make sure that it returns true when it should and returns false when it should. What else? Chris. Very good. So that's cool, man. I know it's after lunch. I'm also very sleepy. It happens. You had something? Yeah, May.
It raises an error if you don't give it the right.
Cool. So it should raise some sort of kind of error if you don't give it the right input. Very good. So this comes into play known as like edge cases, right? So the second rule of writing your tests is something known as edge cases. If something that isn't normally what you put in there is put in there, what do you want to do? So, perfect example, right? Bloop, bloop, right? It should return something if the input is a, let's say, I don't know, a number, right? So, what would this return, right? Remember, this is what it looks like. Look up, look up. The README is empty, and I'll open it again. So what happens if I put 111 here and 111? Can I dot reverse 111? Are you sure? Who's sure? So what's going to happen if I put 234 dot reverse? What happens? Takers? Guesses?
4, 3, 2.
Yeah? It's not a fixed num method, right? So what will happen? What happens when I do this? What do we want it to be? True or false? Well, let's determine it as developers. Developers. Do you want 111 to be false? Before we get to there, what do you want that to be? So, in your minds, you want the string 111 to return true. Who is okay with this? Who is like, in my application, even if it's in the string format and it's a number, I want it to return true as a palindrome. Who says, yes, I want to return true as a palindrome? Who says, no, I don't want it to return true as a palindrome? And this is where it splits, right? It's usually where it splits. And that's because, guess who gets to decide? Your boss, that's right. Very good. Your boss usually decides. But sometimes when your boss is not around and the feature is due in 3 hours and you got to ship it time now, you're deciding. So what do you decide?
What you're asking, should the number 111 be accepted?
Right now we're talking about the string, right? Because the number obviously throws an error and we will get to that. So right now we're just talking about the string 111. Do you consider that in your personal dictionary definition of a palindrome? A number. Remember, we have to make it a string because this is computer land.
Right.
But the number itself, is a number ever a palindrome?
Yes.
No.
Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. So let's play. Who says yes? Who says no? Okay. Having not voted, we'll leave it to you. The purest form of democracy.
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah? Sweet. Good deal. False it is, right? The reason I wanted to show you, so I'll explain, right? It should return true. So, easy, easy, easy. I want to show you something. Oh man, that wasn't it. I want to show you something. Who's seen this before? Exactly. I know. I want to introduce something called failing to you because I know you've never done it. All your labs are perfect the first time through, and it's obvious. This is known as failing a test, right? It's a new concept to you. It's painful at first. When you first get there, it could be alarming. Do not be alarmed. There is a certain thing that happens in writing your tests. It is known as the red-green refactor cycle. And the reason we do that is because when you first load up, you fork it, you clone it, skip the README like a champ, and you immediately run RSpec. What do you see? All green lights? No, you see red, all right? So it starts off as red. The reason we started off as green is because I led you there, right? Usually you write the test, and then you write your method. So test, then your method. So what should happen here? You see false. I'm sorry, you see red, right? Because the tests are bad. I wanted to point that out. But this is what we wanted, right? We wanted true if it's a number. That's just what we're going with as a class, right? Teach you to not pay attention. So what do we get? All passes, right? Green lights. Get that one more hit, you know what I'm saying? Got to get those green lights, you know what I mean? That's because I cheated. No. Now we're thinking, yeah?
Does anyone ever do that, like an RSpec, just like change the tests to make them like whatever, and then they pass and then move on?
No, they never do that. That has never been done in the history of Flatiron School or ever. So, let's write more. Say again?
So I wish it had occurred to me when I was doing all the paperwork.
Definitely not. No, because we will know, right? When I ask you, like, hey, tell me about deli counter. And you're like, well, I Googled the answer and I...
I had an interview with me, and they literally copied and pasted the first answer from Google, and they couldn't answer any questions.
Embarrassing. Cool. Yeah, so they don't do that, right? The bottom line is, this is what we want now, right? Do you want true or false? What do we want? Correct. You want neither, but what do you want?
In general.
Huh?
In nice.
Like, what do you want to happen if your input is 111?
Throw an error.
Yeah.
Raise an error.
Let's raise an error, right? So how do we do that? So RSpec, right? Just remember, what does this followed by parentheses look like to you? It just, you'll get to JavaScript in Mod 3. It's a method, right? Or it's in Ruby land. And it can take a block. And so what that block is going to do is it's going to take at palindrome, and it's going to take 111. And what do we want to do with it? Oops.
Expect it to raise error.
We want it to raise what? Raise an error? Who says there's just one kind of error message? Just one kind. Who says there are multiple kinds of error messages? Okay, so what kind of error message do you want to add in there?
No method error.
Is it no method though?
Well, argument error would be like if there aren't enough arguments, or if there are too many arguments.
Or that the argument is wrong.
But an argument could be many
Well, do you
types.
still have the IRB where you tested?
Hmm?
Do you still have the IRB?
I can open IRB anytime you want. What do you want me to put in there?
Just do like 111 dot reverse and get whatever name of the error it gives you.
Okay, I'll play. So, remember, what does this give me?
Error, no method error.
Undefined method reverse, right?
Yeah, but that's an error, no method error.
So this gives you a no method error. That means you cannot call dot reverse on a fixed num because it does not inherit from the string class, right? So would no method error be the correct type of error to say if someone puts in 111 into your method? Like if you're like, hey, is this a palindrome? What's the word? 111. I'm sorry, there's no method there. Is that the correct type? Instead, hey, is this a palindrome? 111. 111 is a number, so I'm really looking for a word, right? The argument that you're giving me, the example that you're giving me, is kind of weird. It's almost wrong in a sense. So I want to raise like an argument error. The arguments that you're passing in. Remember, how many of you have been frustrated when you run RSpec or learn, and then the error message just does not make sense? It makes no sense. How many times that happened? All right. If you got no method error, what would you immediately think? That you have to write some sort of method. And is that what you want to do when in fact the argument that you're passing in is just wrong? Does that make sense? So right now we want to be looking for an argument error rather than returning a no method error. So the test is done. Let's see what happens. Bloop. Exalt. So this is what happens. All right? You get an unexpected argument error. All right? You got no method error. If I put in here no method error, it would be green. It would pass. But we actually want to get back an argument error if we put in the wrong type of argument. This is how RSpec is running. Because this is more understandable when I'm trying to test my methods. Yeah? So, how would I then have my method return an argument error and not a no method error? Chris?
Check before you make any kind of, alright, so you just check the class of the word, and if it's not a string, then raise it.
Perfect. That is amazing pseudocode. Talk to me, Goose. What do I do?
So if word.class then equals
Does not equal
string,
string.
it's taking up time.
Huh?
Is it begin?
Tell me. You want now you want to raise the error, right?
Yeah.
So if word, so where should I put it? Here?
No, next one.
Okay, so 4.5. Yeah. Done? Huh? And right here. Yeah? All right, let's test.
So there should be a break in there too.
What do you mean break?
After raise argument error. On line 6.
Line 6, you want to break.
5.5.
So on line 5.5, break. What does break do? It breaks a loop. Is if a loop.
Because you know you don't want to do word numbers.
So will this ever catch? Will this ever hit?
It should always.
So what's going on? Huh? Try what? Hmm?
I just want to see what is palindrome 111.
Ah,
Well, I just want to see like what happens at the end.
sure. All right. So is palindrome 111 an argument error? Isn't that what you wanted?
So it throws us out of the method.
Yeah. When you raise error, it'll like stop the thing. Although
Why is
you should probably do this. Yeah. Did you notice that even without the extra end, it's just compiled? It just like threw an error. Errors are weird, right? Errors would just stop your method immediately, which is like, oh, just kidding, stop, pause. Does like a little different functionality. Cool? So this is the way you're used to seeing it, right? Does it make more sense? I'm waiting for your question.
I don't know if I have the right question, but I don't understand why. I understand what's happening with ifOr.class. I understand we have article 1.5, but why are we writing it in program?
I'm sorry, what?
Why are we making it part of the method?
Sorry, what?
In order for that method to work, we have to write that test inside the method. That's a test, right?
What's a test inside what method?
4.5 is to make sure we get up in case we don't write the right thing. We want to raise an argument, right?
That's exactly what the specs describe. Yes.
Right. Okay.
Otherwise, you'll raise the wrong line of error.
I understand that. I'm just saying, so the person who's writing the method in program RB would have to know to write that.
Correct, because remember, I'm your program manager now, right? And I say, if they put in some weird stuff, anything but a string, I want you to throw an argument error. So you write this test, then you run it, and it fails, meaning your method, your current functionality, your feature set, does not do what I want it to do. So you write a test, and then you build a feature. It's almost as if this test is somehow driving your development. It's wild. Yeah? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but like why are you throwing it in the if statement? Like isn't the point of the test so that you don't have to include to raise errors in your actual code?
Why am I throwing in the if statement?
Yeah, like couldn't you just like not run the method if it isn't a string, and then have the argument raised by the test?
The argument raised by a test will give me undefined. I don't want undefined method. I want an argument error.
I think that's just the weird part, right? Like we're correcting the method. Like shouldn't that just like happen on its own?
You're never going to see the test in production. Like the tests don't get run every time the method is called.
I completely understand what it is that you're saying. So, let me explain a little bit more about what test-driven development does. If you write something, right, if at any point somebody changes this method, right, let's say you wrote this, you build this feature, right, you are working on an app and someone's like, hey, I just need a new function to my app and I want to just be able to check something, whether or not it's palindrome. You work there for a year and a half and then you get a better job. Somebody else is going to inherit this code base and they're going to look at you and they're going to be like, huh, that's weird that it raises an argument error. I don't like that. So I'm just going to get rid of it because guess what? You don't work there anymore. Your old boss, me, I got fired. Happens. I'm a dirtbag. And you're just like, let's just keep this. They will run RSpec and they will see that I expect to get an argument error. The reason for that is because I want to specify what type of error that I want. If you got this, right? Okay, I'll play your game. I'll play your game. Cool. What if one day your user puts in 111. What's going to happen? There's no method error. Undefined method reverse for fixed num. What is the first thing you do? I do this. Is that what I want to do? Is that what I want to do? Do I want to go into the fixed num class and build this method that doesn't exist? Why not? It's exactly what the error says. It says this method doesn't exist. Except I can do something really wild. And I can do this. Oh, sorry. Just kidding. Embarrassing. Ugh, it's always going to do this. I'll get into it. I'll get into it offline. But this is what's going to happen. This is what this error points me to. It says that I don't have a method called reverse in fixed num. So now I'm going to build it. Is that what you want to do? So how do I prevent someone from doing this? I never let it get there, right? And how would I prevent someone from getting there? I have to throw the correct error message, all right? If you're frustrated that error messages don't make sense, it's because the developer was too lazy to write good error messages. That's the truth. So do you want to be the developer that writes bad error messages?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So then we're done. We're done.
I wonder all the suffers I have.
Believe it or not, you've only made progress because error messages have been good. You'll appreciate it once you get to React. React error messages are extremely user-friendly.
I've heard the same for JavaScript.
JavaScript's error messages are extremely user-friendly. JavaScript's written in like 10 days. So, anyways, we don't want to do this, right? This is bad. So, let's play this Command Z game, yeah? Hey, if you're sleepy, I don't mind if you want to go to sleep. I really don't. But just commit, you know? Don't half butt anything. Just full butt it. You know what I'm saying? Just go for it. All right. Any questions on this so far?
Sorry, I just have a question about the program stack RV. Why did that have curly braces instead of parentheses?
Huh?
Why does,
Mine's 18.
yeah.
So when you have to do something besides equal, like argument error, for example, you have to throw it in a block. Any other questions? All right, so we're talking about edge cases, right? Numbers are a weird edge case for what's going on here. What about like symbols? Like, you guys like race cars so much, right? I actually copied race car in a cool way. Actually, we should probably do this one. Bloop. I copied race car in a way I think you'll like. Look at this. Isn't that cool? Does this matter? Does this matter to you at all? Is this technically a palindrome to you? It is to me. So for me, I would say should what? Not care about special characters. Right? Cool. So it doesn't. So I don't have to write anything. I don't have to do anything. So you got this like red, green refactor cycle, right? So should I refactor my code or is it cool? Yeah? So we talked about something. I think Olivier brought it up. He said, what about return blank if there are spaces? So what do we have here? What's like that super long one? Here, let's try it. Bloop, 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 bloop. Ah, I messed up. That was almost perfect. Cool. So this is actually, I believe, the longest palindrome ever. So what does this mean? Why did that pass and that fail?
It's counting spaces.
Yeah, absolutely, right? So let's check, right? So word dot reverse is word, is draw. Cool. But what if I did this? They're different, right? So if I double equals them, will they be true? No. Realistically, in my application, is this considered palindrome? Like if you were just talking to me and you were like, hey, tell me a really cool long palindrome, and I said poop space poop. Would that be a palindrome?
That's a yes.
I mean, not the word space, just like actual space, right? Yeah. Or like if I said like a man, a plan, a canal, Panama. You'd be like, I'd have to write that down, but probably, right? So why does my application return false? Why is it busted?
Spaces are counting as characters.
Spaces are being counted as characters. So how do I fix that?
Split by spaces.
I could split by spaces? Sure, I'll play your game. Let's do it. What do we do?
No, don't do it. And then join it.
Okay? Who wants to help me? Okay, nobody, sure. That's cool. Sure.
Don't you want to get rid of all the spaces? Like join?
How would I do it?
Well, I guess before, in the method, you take the argument, which you maybe rename it for immediate sentences,
Sure.
and then
What do I want to do now?
argument,
String.
string.
I want to just do string. I have no idea what to do. Tell me. 3.5?
String.
So just, all right, I'm just going to type exactly what you say. String.
In the parentheses, there is polynomial. String.
This one.
Well, take out word and then string.
This is going to be a long one,
And then
sure.
write Evans, you know,
What?
what?
I'm listening.
No, I think that's good.
I got trolled. I got trolled. Cool. Who actually wants to do this method?
Go to 6.5.
Okay, 6.5.
Yes. Word equals word dot split open parenthesis quote space and quote and parenthesis dot join open parenthesis quote that.
Yeah? Man, you guys are wild. You guys are wild. Let's see if it works. Oops. Nice. Nice. Yeah?
I was just gonna say, do you need the last thing, the parameters and join, or I think it defaults to that.
You want to
Just take-
red, green refactor? Love where your head's at. Let's try it. Huh? So the default parameters for join will be like the single.
I think the default parameter is also space.
Oh, you want a refactor? Red, green refactor. Let's do it.
No, I don't think so.
Split join? You know it. It is, in fact, yeah. Cool. So we will split then join. Great code. Cool. So we talked about edge cases, right? So we got numbers, we got strings, we got symbols, right? We have spaces. What else could you start considering?
Actualization.
Yes, that is like another one. Right? So what do we want this to be? True? Is that what I put? Yeah, I put true. So what if there is, I'll play your game, race car. Will this work right now? How do we fix it? That's the red. Let's get those sweet greens, you know what I'm saying? Not to be confused with the restaurant sweet green, which I have no relation with.
We just add some down cases on 8, so after.
Yeah, let's do that. Right, let's do that.
Or 7.
Sure. Yeah, is that what you want to do? How efficient? Let's find out. I'll play. Very good. Cool. So that's basically like majority of like the edge cases, right? You're talking about like weird spaces, symbols, numbers, if the input isn't even like the correct data type. So it'll also work if, like, say for example, boop, 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 we did something like an array. Oops, that was bad. Boop, boop, boop. All right. So like, what if this was an array? What did that do? Oh, really? Interesting. It's a weird shortcut. What if this was an array? Would you consider that true?
This is kind of like a boss decision, right?
Yes, this is a boss decision.
If all like it's an array of palindromes, should it return true?
Exactly. This is exactly the type of stuff that you're going to face, right? Someone's like, hey, I need you to build this feature. You're like, oh, that's easy. I'm just going to do word dot word reverse. All right, cool. See you later. And then you're going to start working, and then weird stuff's going to happen. You're going to pass this to what is known as QA. I put that in quotes because I forgot Mike Cheng was a QA person. And they're awesome! They're so awesome! They're so awesome. Because they love making sure your code is good. And yeah, I would bring this up and be like, hey, what if we receive an array as input? Like, what do you want to do? A lot of times, your boss will not be technical. You'll have a Scrum Master who got a Scrum Agile methodology certificate and is now your boss. And you're going to say, cool, I'll figure it out. And then you're going to do this. Nah, dog, I'm good. Nah, chill, chill. All right? And boom, you're done. Just kidding. Ugh. The argument error, right? So how do we do that? A little bit of this action. A little bit of this. Bloop. A little bit of that. So instead of 111, we just stringify that real quick, throw a little bracket around there, and done. Does that make sense? So I just made that an array. Cool. Yeah. So you're like, no, if it's not string, I'm not taking it. If the sal's not on the side, I send it back. You know what I'm saying? Any other questions? So there are 3 rules. The first one is you have to make sure it works to include it returning false when it shouldn't work. That is part of working functionality, right? 2 is edge cases. Number 3 is what is known as space complexity. So space complexity is as simple as, what if someone puts in, oh, I don't know, this. Is that a palindrome? I'll show you something cool. Right? It gives me what? Unbelievable. Right? Does that equal original string? So, what will this actually return me? Is that a palindrome?
No.
Obviously not.
Yeah.
Yeah! You tell him. Thanks, Daniel.
You're welcome.
Right? Should return false if there are what?
No.
If
Characters.
empty string. If empty. Something like that. However you want to describe it. At this point, it's like, I want to write good readable tests for the person that's going to do this lab, and all they care about is whether or not they pass the test.
No input.
All right, to return false if what? Input is empty. Cool. So let's do that. Look up, look up, look up, look up, look up, look up. False. How do we fix that? This is the red. Let's get that to green.
You test it. Test whether or not it's empty after you test for the argument error. And
Where's that?
it's empty then. So, you hit the argument error, then do else if or dot empty is true, or this. Or dot empty.
You want to do it again? Word if else. Else if?
Yeah.
Sure. Else if what?
Or dot empty. Or
Oh, I'm sorry. That's my fault. Word.
okay.
Word. I'm doing terrible. All right. Is true.
Then you can say, well, or I mean, you don't have to write equals true. You can just write that.
Cool. That's what you want to do.
And then new line.
Okay.
Right. You can say false.
False.
Then new line else.
Cool. We go with this? Let's find out. What great code. That was actually a tricky one, right? So in terms of space complexity, and I'm going to like wrap this up, the other one is going to be, what if it's, what else is like a really popular space complexity issue? If it's 0, then you have imagination. No. So the most common one after empty is this. All right? Surprise. What will that return if I double equal it? Is this word a palindrome?
Yes.
I used A, right? A happens to be a word. What if I put this? Boop. Is this, should this be true or false? That's normally a question I go higher, right? But in the world of Evans Wang, very likely I'm just going to put false. So I don't want this to ever come back as true, because generally speaking, one letter is not really like a word, generally, and I don't want it to come back false.
Well, what about like, from
Things that are not words that are also not.
anything that.
Yes, that we're going to get to that. Exactly, we're going to get to that. Yeah? So, how do we fix this? Let's fix this one. Sean, go for it.
I would do keep adding because multi-staters would do above between lines 7 and 8. So in line 8, there'd be something like else if again.
Okay. Sure.
And then do space and then word dot length like less than 2.
Okay.
And then next line false. So words length is less than 2.
Amazing.
Let's just get rid of 6 and 7.
Can we get rid of 6 and 7?
Because if it's empty, then the length is going to be C2.
Yeah? Great refactor. So remember, red, green, refactor.
What
Yeah?
about-
That's how testing works.
Did we not want to take into consideration, like, I would say A is
Huh?
I would say A is a palindrome because it's a word.
Yeah. That would be very easy though, right?
Yeah.
Like we would like basically have to hard code those extreme edge cases. So let's not do that here because it would get out of control. But what if, go ahead Nikki, I'm listening.
For what we have, if your word was like 5 spaces, wouldn't that technically be empty, but then pass the test?
Sure. Do you want this? This is more than 2. Just to make sure. I mean, that's more than 2 probably. How do we fix that?
We could do the, we could change the order of the else. I mean, like you could, after you change, after 11. I mean,
Do like word
Okay, you see how it's getting really complex? And all of a sudden you have all of this, whereas right in the beginning, most of you thought was good enough. So the last note I will leave you with, right, is when it comes to writing production code, right, and being a real developer, a lot of you are just writing these things to pass the labs. You don't fully understand sometimes the features that you're trying to implement in all of its complexity. And that's okay, right? We're just scratching the surface here. But what I want you to start thinking is all of the different types of inputs and all the different types of things that can happen to your code. You will start to see this in your projects where if it's like, hey, are you over 100 pounds, right? If this is like some sort of diet app, and then they put in K, and you're like, that's not an input, and then you have to like do the else for it, right? And put in case they put the wrong thing. So you're going to start sanitizing your inputs and making sure that it's good to go. I've taken the liberty to do this for you. Oop, oop. This is the code that I'm going to push up for you. So this is the code that we wrote, all right? I'm going to comment that out. Actually, I need this one. Bloop. Actually, I don't. Just kidding, because I also wrote it. So this is what I check for. So this is everything, right? I wrote these for you. So you have these notes. But poop palindrome, right? We have one. We have the white space. Weird capitalizations in there, anywhere in the word. The extra space. Do I want this bang in there? I should not care about it. How do I get rid of this bang? Has anyone heard of something called regular expression? Cool. If you haven't, Google it. It's worth your time, right? You want to say something, Janai?
I was just confused about how space complexity is different from edge cases. Like the space or empty string, just like edge cases.
Mm-hmm. So in that sense, right? This right here is a really long one, right? But in theory, the same applies, right? You can have something like whenever you're ready.
That's good.
Cool. Is that a palindrome? You have to account for this nonsense. This is space complexity. It is a different subcategory of edge cases, but it is something that is completely separate on its own. Yeah? All right. So we talk about this, all right? What if they just hard code true in there? Like if they actually just put in true, it'll return true, no? Have you thought about that? If I'm like, oh, I want this Boolean to return true based on certain conditions, hard code true in there. Sometimes it'll just return true just because. So some of you, the point that I'm trying to make, are wondering, right, like this is the original code, and all of this is just what we were able to develop in that short amount of time. Just with that test. And the tests drive our development. Here is what I would describe as production-ready code just for this one feature. This is the code that I wrote. This is what I would ship. So I raise an argument error if the word is not a string, because the difference between this and this is almost nothing, except one key difference. This reads better. The only difference between a mid-level developer and a senior developer is not really experience. It's not. It's cleaner, more readable code. This really reads, I'm going to raise an argument error if the word is not a string. It's literally what it says, almost word for word. The code is just better. Then I return false if it's less than 2. Actually, I'd probably say if Empty or word.length equals to 1. What? Oh, sorry, yeah. Boop, boop, boop. Sorry. If the word is empty, or if its length is 1. All right? However you want to write it. Right? Less than 2, empty, or 1. Whatever's easier for you. I would downcase it. Right? I would change this. I would never reassign the original input. That is very key. So what do we do here? Just to bring it back. We reassigned the original input. Never do that. This will be a principle that is more enforced later on, but I want to introduce it to you now. You never want to reassign what the original input is. Because if you ever need to compare it to the original input, for whatever reason, you have lost it. So do not mutate the original input. It is easier to just throw a new variable and mutate the data from there. So all I do here is I downcase it, and then I take out any weird symbols, white spaces, and I replace it with just an empty string. So that does my join, my split, and it wipes out all my special characters in one. And then I check to see if it's the reverse. And that's it. And that should cover all of my tests. And so this right here versus this right here is the difference between just making it work, then making it really pretty and ready for production. It's okay starting off here. It's okay. In your mind, you'll start to think of some weird edge cases. And that's all right. And you'll apply for that. You will send it to QA, and they will beat you until you produce this. And that is why it's okay to be a junior developer. QA will catch you. So any questions? Any more imposter syndrome? This is how it works, right? You are there right now with your Ruby. This is week 3. There is no more Ruby for us to teach you. Yes?
How about, like, for the code for projects and stuff like that? Because, like, you know, we're writing a lot of, like, complex methods and stuff like that. Like, what do you expect from us in terms of a level of, like,
I expect it to work, and that's it. Mike is no longer QA, and I am not QA. Just make it work. Just make it work. Then you'll refactor it later. I promise. And other hilarious jokes you tell yourself.
Like, we want it to be able to work to the point where we have all